Hi, I'm Clarissa Mosley, and today we're going to take a deep dive into the psychotherapeutic dynamic underlying imposter syndrome. And by understanding the many areas that imposter syndrome can emerge from, you can possibly have a better chance of getting a handle on that nagging feeling that you don't belong where you are right now. We are going to talk about imposter syndrome. No, we're not. We shouldn't talk about that. We're not even qualified to talk about it. Yes, you are, Clarissa. You're a psychologist. Imposter syndrome is defined as the inability to accept that your success is a result of your hard work, your capacities, your capabilities, or the experience and the skills that you bring. And it's the feeling that you are a phony, that you don't deserve to be where you are, and the only reason you're there is good luck or chance. Imposter syndrome. Dun, dun, dun. In 2020, a KMPG study found that 75% of executive women felt that they had imposter syndrome, that they didn't deserve where they actually were. Many times these were executive women in roles that they had just transitioned into or recently gained. Now, the interesting point about this is that if you are new in something, I don't really feel you can actually call that real imposter syndrome. It actually is the fact that you haven't gained those 10,000 hours or whatever it takes, not that it usually takes that long unless you want to be an expert golfer or something. You haven't actually had the amount of experience and acclimatization to what you're doing to actually feel competent. If you've just started somewhere, please give yourself a break, learn the ropes, get to know things, sort of feel in it for a while, and then maybe that feeling will go away. But I mentioned a word before, incompetence. So one of the fundamental underlying features of imposter syndrome is this feeling of incompetence. We actually don't feel good enough to be doing what we're doing. And it could be any kind of role. It doesn't have to be top KMPG executive, women fighting their way through a man's world. But as we mentioned that, I want to talk about that because it seems to be that more women than men experience imposter syndrome. Why could this be? Well, research will show that women more characteristically experience imposter syndrome, not to say that men don't, because of their socialization. So what happens when you're a little girl, you're in the schoolyard, you want to play, you want to share, you want to cooperate. That's the kind of games that girls play. Boys, I'm going to race you. I'm going to be the winner. I'm the best. The competition amongst boys is encouraged. They are supported in being bullish and the first one there. It's understood if it's a boy, if he's grappled his way to the front of the line. So there are personality traits that are well researched, and although this might sound just a little bit Jordan Peterson, he does take a lot of his information from research, which does show that in terms of personality factors, men are scoring higher on aggression and assertiveness, whereas women score higher on sociability, friendliness, and agreeability. As you can see, agreeability and friendliness are not go-getter, top executive, top of the pack kind of traits. Whereas, let me think, is assertiveness and aggression that? Absolutely yes. So what happens when a woman gets to an executive role? There's a level of discomfort, isn't there? She's in a role where she has to have traits that might be antithetical to her natural predisposition and personality. Now we can also globalize that to if you're an introvert and you're in a role where you need to be an extrovert, you are also more likely to feel that you are having an imposter experience because that is not naturally who you are. So we do have to take on board who we are naturally, what are our natural traits, what do we lean towards? And if we're in a position where we're not using the natural inborn capacity of who we truly are, we can feel a jarring between us and where we are. That's what happens at that very sort of general social level. But what can also happen within an individual's history is a developmental or relational trauma. Now, when we have grown up in a family that is nitpicky, derogatory, critical, mean, unsupportive in many different ways, what that does is it embodies a person with a sense of never being good enough. Nothing's ever good enough. If they made the bed, they didn't turn the sheets down properly. If they did the dishes, they forgot to empty this. There's always something wrong. There's a parent that focuses on what's wrong. Maybe their grades were never good enough. Maybe it was that sort of competitive tiger parent kind of you've got to be the best environment, so that the child develops a sense of, well, I've got to keep trying. I'm never going to get there. Right? There's this drivenness where you never get your cup filled. You never get the praise. That becomes embodied in you. This is part of your conditioning. So your conditioning is going to be that I have to keep trying. I've got to keep doing. I've got to do more. But I never get to this point where I feel satisfied, where I get the praise, where I feel proud or happy with myself. And you can see how easily that can lead to a feeling of imposter syndrome, because you may have tried, you may have put in the best application for the job, and you may be told, oh, you've got this job because you've done this, and this. But in yourself, you're like, yeah, but it's not enough. I don't feel I've earned this. I don't feel deserving, because that's embodied in you from your conditioning, from the critical parents, teachers, sibling rivalry, sibling jealousy. So we talked about schoolyard jealousy and competition. Let's look at the jealousy that happens within a home. I know a woman who had competitive issues with other women, and she didn't realize that she had them or what they were until it came largely in her face in an interaction. And as we worked through this, we realized that in her upbringing, her sister had been really jealous of her. She was like, her sister had to be the center of attention. Her sister picked on her for being prettier or having more things. And so the woman, as a strategy to cope with her jealous competitive sister, downplayed her achievements, downplayed herself, and made sure that she was always really nice and friendly with other women. Now, she didn't realize this had come from her experiences with her jealous sister until she was older. Now, this also highlights another phenomenon of the imposter syndrome, whereby mostly women will downplay their level of success and experience in order not to intimidate or alienate other people. And this is pretty highly featured in partnership. So women tend to know that the smarter, the more successful, the more money, the more power a woman has, the less mates and boyfriends or maybe girlfriends there are for her, because she's hit a ceiling of it's not necessarily about desirability. It's that men can be a little bit, they want to be the big guy with the big pants on. Now, I'm not saying this is always true, but we can certainly think of cases where it is. So this kind of woman will also downplay herself in front of her friends, because maybe she's the one with the competitive sister, or the one that knows that where she's at is going to alienate her friends who are maybe just stay-at-home moms or working in as an accountant, and she's an executive director. So she downplays her true success. And I see this a lot in women. It tends to be this natural, automatic, like, oh no, I'm just, I work in a bank, I mean to say I don't run it. Whereas men, on the other hand, have got a higher likelihood to embellish who they are and what they've done. Let's think about, so you're a managing director of a large landscaping firm. Wow. Or, oh, you're a gardener. Oh. So let's get back to the darker side of our childhood that can lead to this feeling of incompetence that underlies the sense of imposter syndrome. So imagine you were abused, physically, emotionally abused, psychologically tormented, or worse, sexually abused. This is going to lead to a core sense of self that is very deficient, not good enough, shameful. Now, in trauma, I will digress a little bit and say that if there is a really supportive environment around the trauma, it can help mitigate the intense effects of it. But if that trauma happened within your family of origin from someone who was meant to be taking care of you, it's devastating. And so the person may be driven toward a sort of perfectionism in order to sort of make good, like make good in the world, or have power or success or achieve, or when they get there, they have still got this feeling of being broken, deficient, shameful, wrong, never good enough. Now, it saddens me to even talk about these heavy things, but they're such a reality in so many of our lives. Everybody has something somewhere where we have been really wounded or hurt or traumatized by another person, usually. So these things can lie buried also, maybe not buried in the completely unconscious out of our reach, but in our subconscious. And so much happens in our subconscious that we're not aware of, that if it's processing underneath or gurgling around under there, and then we get in an experience and we're like, oh, I can't be here. I don't deserve this. And we don't see the thread. So the healing of the imposter syndrome is to start to look at your background, at where you came from. What messages did you get from your family, from your mum, from your dad, from your brothers and sisters, from your teachers? What messages about yourself were you conditioned with throughout your childhood, and what beliefs do they form in terms of what value you have and what you truly deserve? What traumas have impacted you so greatly that they sit in your way and mean that you can't really move past them cleanly and clearly, but you may not be completely aware of them all the time. So in the healing work of imposter syndrome, we start with the level, right, okay, am I new at this job? Have I got things to learn? Maybe I just feel out of place because I don't know the ropes yet. And then we go to the next layer and we go, okay, so am I actually able to do this job? Do I actually have the skills and capacities? Maybe there's a modicum of truth in where you are and you don't quite have the skills and capacity, but then you can work on developing them. And then we can go and look at your social layer. How were you socialized? What was it like in your school environment? Did you get bullied? Now, if you had been bullied or persecuted by other children, if you had teachers that were putting you down, this is going to undermine your sense of competence and safety. Now, safety, I also leverage that on to the next layer of the deeper relational trauma that can come from actually having abuse or neglect in your childhood, in your family. And bullying is certainly an align with that, because it leaves a lasting effect on our self-esteem and our sense of safety in the world. All these traumatic experiences that we have with others lead us to not feel safe. So often in a position that's kind of new, we feel more exposed and vulnerable. So this issue of safety comes to the surface. And we may not be aware of where this issue comes from. It's just this gnawing discomfort. And so what we do is it comes into our awareness and we go, well, clearly I shouldn't be here. Clearly I don't deserve this. Clearly somebody else should be doing what I'm doing because I'm not good enough. So I encourage you to gently, carefully start to look through your history and look at the events that might have undermined your ability to feel deserving and worthy and competent, or the ability to even become competent in a job or a role or ownership of something, or a winning, or even a relationship. We can get imposter syndrome when we're in a relationship with someone who we might think is way too good for us, right? And then by default, we feel less than and inadequate and insecure. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic, but it's still along the same lines. So in healing and resolving your imposter syndrome, have a look at the thread of all of the times where or the strong moments where you may have felt insufficient and incompetent. Was it was it the way your parents always took away the good? You got a prize or a good grade and it was never good enough, or you did something and it was never good enough? Were there actual abuse? Was your parent verbally abusive, and that's obviously going to lead you to feel incompetent in and of yourself? Were there safety issues in your house? Was there drug and alcohol use? Obviously, there's a lack of consistency when a parent has drug and alcohol problems. If it's both parents, then it's really bad. If it's one parent and the other one's got to overfunction, a lot of the other parent's energy will go towards that and not towards parenting the children. So there's a whole slew of dynamics that can underlie this feeling. And so you can go through this checklist to find out, what is the reality and the truth in this? Do I just need to learn what I'm doing? Do I need to develop my sense of competence overall? Am I a driven perfectionist where nothing ever feels good enough? Have I been bullied at school and there's a sense or punished or strongly or humiliated or psychologically abused in my home or at school or by others where I don't feel safe? Was there a real safety issue in my family when I was growing up so that I could never quite relax and I'm always looking out around the corner for some danger to come and get me, and therefore I can never feel safe in the world? So there's a lot of things. I think most of you, if you've listened to this and you've taken the time to hear and go, oh yeah, that's right, I was bullied or yeah, my mother was always picking on everything that I did, or my father never gave me any approval, or my father was an alcoholic, and all of the other areas of trauma and abuse. Now, if that has been activated in you, please be gentle with yourself. So it's one thing to think, okay, I've got imposter syndrome, I need to work through, I've just got to settle into this new place or this new role and everything will be okay, and minimizing it. And it's another thing realizing that you have had a deeply or many traumatic experiences. I really want you to be very gentle with yourself, to be gentle with your inner child as they may be getting triggered by this, to be soothing to your inner self, to acknowledge what happened, be gentle, be aware, be caring, seek help and support, and know that your psyche will never give you more than you can cope with right now. So if you've come to this video and you've listened this far, then this was meant to be. It was all in alignment with what you needed to hear and what you needed for your healing right here and right now. So I hope you've enjoyed this deep therapeutic dive into the underlying dynamics of imposter syndrome. And if you did, give that like button a little pop, and you might want to subscribe if you want to hear any more of my deep therapeutic dives into other topics. Feel free to put in your comments about your experiences with imposter syndrome and what you may have discovered in the course of listening to this video, or in your own research or understanding of your own experience that I might not have covered. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you again. Bye. I'm qualified to talk about this. Oh, but what if they don't believe me? What if I shouldn't even be here? Imposter syndrome.